2:05. For OTB Sports Radio, I'm Anne-Marie Donlan.
OTB Sports Radio. The Rugby World Cup on OTB Sports Radio.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
Sexton from outside the 10-metre line. It's spinning. It looks good. Le drop de Jonathan Sexton.
Rugby World Cup on Off the Ball. Updates, analysis and opinion across all OTB channels from start to finish. This is OTB Sports Radio.
OTB Sports Radio.
Streaming right now on offtheball.com, on OTB Sports Radio, and video across all of our social platforms at the moment. You can get your comments and questions into us. What do you make of the Irish side name to take on Samoa this Saturday morning in that must-win Pool A clash? 12 changes in total. We'll go through the team in more detail with Alan Quinlan a little bit later on. He'll be looking through the team as well with us, and all of our rugby coverage here on Off the Ball, brought to you by Vodafone. Team of us, everyone in. First though, we have to get to the big news of the day, and probably the big news of the tournament, because after days of speculation over what was going to happen with Typhoon Hagibis, World Rugby have confirmed this morning that they've cancelled 2 games this Saturday, with Sunday's Pool A decider between Scotland and host Japan also in doubt. The games that are officially called off now and put down as scoreless draws: New Zealand versus Italy in Pool B and England versus France in Pool C. Both of those games not deciding any teams that are progressing to the quarterfinals, but they would potentially be deciding first and second place in those pools. The Pool D game, though, on Friday morning, tomorrow, between Australia and Georgia in Shizuoka at 7:15 Japanese time, will be played as scheduled. Saturday, though, the Pool A match between Ireland and Samoa in Fukuoka, that will go ahead, World Rugby are saying, but the Pool B and Pool C games between New Zealand and Italy and England and France are cancelled. And also then on Sunday, they go on to say every effort is being made to ensure Sunday's matches will be played as scheduled. A thorough assessment of venues will take place after the typhoon has passed before a final decision is made on Sunday morning. And the game very much in question there is Scotland against Japan, the last game of Pool A, which is potentially deciding which 2 teams are going through to the quarterfinals of the Rugby World Cup. Ireland will know on Saturday themselves if they win with a bonus point, they are through regardless, but that game would decide which team also goes through as well. And if it was to go down as a scoreless draw, there would be 2 points for each side. Japan would qualify first in that pool, and potentially, depending on what happens in the Ireland-Samoa game, it would knock Scotland out before they even get a chance to get on the pitch and play that crucial game. Scotland, in their own statement, have said, "We're in regular dialogue with World Rugby at all levels to work to ensure our fixture against Japan on Sunday can be played as planned. Public safety is the clear priority. Scottish Rugby fully expects contingency plans to be put in place to enable Scotland to contest for a place in the quarterfinals on the pitch, and will be flexible to accommodate this." But all this news was confirmed this morning by World Rugby in the early hours of the morning at a press conference. We can hear now what the head of the Rugby World Cup, Alan Gilpin, had to say.
After extensive evaluation of the latest detailed weather information, we are today confirming adjustments to this weekend's Rugby World Cup 2019 match schedule as a result of the predicted significant impact of Typhoon Hagibis. This includes, regrettably, the decision to cancel matches on safety grounds. Based on this morning's information from our independent weather experts, Hagibis is predicted to be the biggest typhoon of the 2019 season and is highly likely to cause considerable disruption in the Tokyo, Yokohama and City of Toyota areas throughout Saturday, including likely public transport shutdown and disruption. As a result of the detailed independent advice from the weather advisors, and given the scheduled public transport closures, we've taken the very difficult but we think right decision to cancel certain matches in the affected areas. As we briefed you before the tournament, for pool matches that do not go ahead as scheduled, these matches are cancelled and 2 points will be awarded to each team in line with tournament rules. Based on the latest detailed weather information we have, we can provide the following update. For tomorrow, Friday the 11th of October, the Pool D match scheduled between Australia and Georgia in Shizuoka we expect to be played as scheduled. For Saturday the 12th of October, the Pool A match between Ireland and Samoa in Fukuoka, we expect to be played as scheduled. The Pool B match between New Zealand and Italy in the city of Toyota will be cancelled. The Pool C match between England and France at Yokohama Stadium will be cancelled. As you can imagine, the decision to cancel these matches has not been taken lightly and has been made with the best interests of team, public, tournament and volunteer safety as a priority, based on the expert advice and the detailed information we have available.
Yeah, that was head of the Rugby World Cup, Alan Gilpin, there speaking at this morning's press conference. Alan Quinlan's with me here now. Quinny, Japan were awarded the Rugby World Cup 10 years ago in 2009. 2.5 years ago, we had the pool draw, which we were told is on that early so that everyone has a chance to prepare everything logistically and get organised for venues and hotels and stuff like that. You know, typhoon season and extreme weather conditions are likely to be taking place in certain parts of the year, this being part of that year. How did World Rugby not have various contingencies in place over the course of the last 10 years when they knew this tournament was going to be played, so that in the event of severe weather and a typhoon like this, that they knew exactly what they were going to be able to do with various games, push dates back, bring dates forward, etc. How did we get to a point where we have 2 games called off and another couple on Sunday potentially in danger?
I'm not sure, Neil. I think they certainly have had time to plan this, as you said. The alternative is to move the matches, and I think it's very difficult to kind of look at every match every couple of days and think we can move them somewhere else, because you could move them somewhere else and the typhoon could hit there, and it's just part and parcel of this part of the world and this time of year. It's not normal to get typhoons in October. I think they usually finish around the end of September. That's what we're told. That's what I was told when I landed here a few weeks ago. There was already about 18 or 19 recorded, and it's usually in the mid-20s. I haven't had any here in 3 weeks, but this one that's coming is a monster, really, and it's very unfortunate. It damages this World Cup. There's no doubt about it. People will talk about it afterwards. England and France, for example, a lot of French and English people would have come out to see the last pool game. Everyone would. It's a decider, really. Who wins the pool, and unfortunately, it's gone. And New Zealand, Italy as well. That I heard a story today about Geraldini, the Italian hooker, who's been out injured all year, and he was hoping to come off the bench for 20 minutes and finish his international career, and he's devastated. And Treacy as well is probably someone else who played it for the last time for Italy. Maybe he might play on, I don't know. But it's very, very difficult on the supporters and the people who've travelled out here. But I know people can lay the blame on World Rugby, but there's not a lot you can do, because potentially if you, for example, with England and France, if you have another venue, which I was told yesterday that the game was going to be moved to Oita in the South Island, where the storm is not going to hit. They obviously changed their mind on the logistics side of moving everybody there and TV crews and cameras and all that kind of stuff. But I think both those games should have been moved down to the South Island here, and even if they were played behind closed doors, you're still playing a game. You're still having 2 teams go at each other and try and fulfill the fixture. So it's understandable that the games have been called off, or that the games have been affected, and that the safety of volunteers, supporters, people travelling to and from the game, because there's a lot of logistics go on to run a match, any of these games. It's understandable that their safety is number one. And, if one person died in that storm, if they played a game, well, then it's one too many. And but you do have a point that there should have been alternative situations sought for these games, because it does kind of throw the whole competition up in the air a little bit, and it discredits it a little bit.
Yeah, and as you mentioned there, like, I mean, if these games were to have gone ahead as scheduled and, you know, there's an enormous wreckage around the stadium and it's unsafe for fans to get there and something does happen to a fan making their way to a match, that is obviously far bigger than any World Cup game will ever be. But if you had made this decision maybe several years ago that in the event of something like this happening where a game was not going to be able to be played in a certain venue because of a typhoon or extreme weather conditions, that, you know, you can move it to a different part of Japan, you can have it there in black and white written down that it's going to be played behind closed doors so that it prevents like a rush of fans trying to scramble across the country to get there and potentially putting themselves in even more danger and putting an enormous load on the transport and the infrastructure there, that the teams themselves know that, okay, we're just going to be going here and getting this match played. And, okay, fair enough, England and France, they're both qualified anyway. And to be honest, I think when Eddie Jones was asked about it, he wasn't really too pushed. England were guaranteed to go through and they just take their first place in the pool. I'd probably say France aren't too bothered either by it all. They know they're going to have another match and, you know, if it means that they're getting an extra bit of rest before a quarter-final, so be it. But it's the Scotland and Japan game and the uncertainty over that where if Scotland were to go out of the World Cup without getting onto the pitch for that last game, does it put a massive asterisk beside everything Japan have done during this tournament?
Yeah, it does. If the Scotland-Japan game doesn't go ahead and Scotland were to exit the competition, I think it completely discredits it, and it will be a disaster. They've got to play that game, whether it's on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week, no matter what. And going back to your point about moving it, in their defence, Neil, you know, the storm was supposed to hit the South Island earlier in the week. So where I am now and where Ireland are based in Fukuoka, and Oita, Kumamoto is down here. They're some of the venues down here. And, you know, if the storm was predicted, as predicted, kind of Monday, Tuesday, it was predicted to hit here. So then it changed course and it's going straight for Tokyo. So it's very, very difficult to go, well, we'll move it one way and move it to another place 2 years in advance. You just don't know what the weather is going to do. I think the biggest doubt about having it here is these things happen this time of year. And it's just unfortunate that it has happened. So if they moved matches at the start of the week from here, from the South Island up to the North Island, well, then they'd be moving it straight into the storm. So you do have to kind of wait until you know the path and the course of it, and everybody knows it's going to hit the Tokyo area now, Yokohama, Toyota City, Nagoya, and all those places. So it's just unfortunate. It's very, very difficult. But if the Scotland-Japan game doesn't go ahead, Ireland will be disappointed as well, because they'll be hoping Scotland can beat Japan, and they'll be hoping to get a bonus point win against Samoa and top the group. So there's a lot riding in this game, and it's something that's going to be very, very difficult. Scotland will be livid if it happens and they exit the competition. And look, hopefully it doesn't happen. I think, as you say, the other two games, it suits France. England are going to top the group. They were probably going to beat France anyway. France, there was talks that they'd maybe put out a second-string team against England. On their side of the draw, they would have been meeting Australia or Wales. I think either or for them is they would think a winnable game. There's not much of a difference. So it doesn't really change anything in that. But the Scotland-Japan game is a game that if that doesn't go ahead, there's going to be big problems.
Yeah, and did Gregor Townsend dig himself a bit of a hole earlier in the week? Because when everyone thought that the storm was going to be heading towards Fukuoka, where Ireland are, Townsend said the Ireland game cannot be postponed. It has to be played that day. If it cannot be played that day, then it's 2 points for each team. And you contrast it now with what is coming out of the Scottish Rugby Union, now that their game is in doubt, saying we fully expect contingency plans to be put in place to enable Scotland to contest for a place in the quarterfinals on the pitch, and will be flexible to accommodate this. Have they, they're being hoisted on their own petard here. They've made a fuss about how important it is for the rules to be the rules, and as much as I wouldn't think it's fair if their game was to be called off and Scotland go out, they have kind of made a point of this, of stating rules are rules.
Yeah, and that's he's got himself twisted there a little bit, Gregor. And obviously, if the storm was hitting here and the game had to be called off, and it was 2 points for either team, that would mean that they could go through by just any sort of a win against Japan. So the rules are the rules. But I have I don't know if you can see it here, but I got this. I'll try and show it you. A statistics handbook from ITV and World Rugby, and inside the first page, the first couple of pages, you won't be able to read it, but the text here is clearly stating that eventuality about games not being finished if there is a storm, if they have to be cancelled in the first half, it finishes 0-0. If it goes to the second half and the game has to be called off, the score stands in that particular game. If a game can't be fulfilled and it's called off, it's 2 points to either side. So, to be fair, it's clearly stated there. So, but there's going to be an uproar if this happens, And at the end of the day, we all want to see this game happen. 2 points each to Scotland and Japan means Japan top the group. We're second and Scotland are out. I think Joe Schmidt would rather try and be in a position to win the group and see how that game goes. But look, all they can worry about is the Samoa game on Saturday now at this stage, and try and focus on getting a good result there and making sure they get into the quarterfinals.
Yeah, and obviously for Scotland, if that was called off, an even greater disappointment when you consider how they went out of the last World Cup with that late decision against Australia that World Rugby came out and clarified was the wrong call, and it would be 2 World Cups in a row where they've kind of been essentially taken out for no reason, without really doing much wrong themselves. But I am going to ask though as well, because a lot of people have pointed out, Sergio Treacy, one in particular, to have said it today, we're completely going into hypothetical situations, granted, but as he pointed out, if New Zealand had lost against South Africa and they needed to beat Italy this weekend by 4 points, or if they needed a bonus point win to go through, do you think New Zealand and Italy would have been called off? Would suitable arrangements have been made and postponements made? Possibly.
I think, look, again, it's for each particular team, and it's unfair. If you like, to be fair, it is very unfair that you can say there's nothing riding on that game, but there's a lot riding on the game, because there's probably guys in the Italian squad who may get an opportunity to play that mightn't have played at this World Cup so far. It might be their first shot at it. So there's a lot, and there's a couple of the New Zealanders who want to play as well. So yeah, it is hypothetical, but I would imagine if New Zealand needed to play this game and win this game, there'd be a lot of pressure to play it. But look, it's probably one of the ones that they can forfeit and do that for, and the same England-France. I don't think England-France mind. Yeah. I don't think either manager or coach would mind the situation, because it doesn't really change a lot. It's just a pity that this game's called off. But like I said, if the Scotland-Japan game is called off, well, that'll create all sorts of problems and issues going forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll move on from the weather and we'll get towards the Irish team, because as you mentioned there, it was named early this morning. Ireland named their squad for the game this Saturday against Samoa. For the first time in the tournament, Robbie Henshaw is included. He's making his first appearance, having suffered a hamstring injury just after Ireland arrived in Japan. Rob Kearney misses out though. He suffered a knock in the win against Russia a week ago. Jordan Larmour gets the nod over Andrew Conway to start at full back. It's a virtually full strength selection though. 12 changes from the win against Russia. Johnny Sexton, Keith Earls and Tyg Byrne all retained. Byrne actually shifts from the second row to the back row. He starts at blindside flanker with Peter O'Mahony on the bench. Rhys Ruddock not included, interestingly enough, in the matchday 23, even after his man of the match display 7 days ago. In full though, Cian Healy, Rory Best and Tyg Furlong in the front row. James Ryan and Ian Henderson renewed their partnership behind him. Tyg Byrne has Josh van der Fleer on the open side in the back row. CJ Stander makes his 4th appearance in a row at this World World Cup. He's at number 8. And first choice halfbacks in Johnny Sexton and Conor Murray. Robbie Henshaw is in at 13 with Bundy Aki inside him. And you've Keith Earls, Jacob Stockdale and Jordan Larmour in the back 3. While the bench, Niall Scannell preferred over Sean Cronin at hooker. Dave Kilcoyne and Andrew Porter the props. Jean Klein, Peter O'Mahony, Luke McGrath, Joey Carberry back in the matchday 23. Here's hoping he actually makes it onto the pitch this time. And Andrew Conway finishing off the squad. Quinny, overall thoughts on that matchday 23? We were expecting something along the lines of a full strength Irish team, probably aside from maybe Rob Kearney and Joe Schmidt's call in the back row. We're pretty much looking at full strength there, aren't we?
Yeah, it's a very strong side, and I think it's probably not exactly what the side he would have wanted to pick before the tournament started, but they need a game. They've had 9 days off, and then, hopefully they'll have recalibrated a little bit. And, it was a tough kind of couple of weeks for them. They lost to Japan and maybe a little bit of not hitting their straps against Russia. They were very positive after that, and I think they're trying their best to stay positive within themselves. And there's a lot of good players in there, a lot of experience in there, and they probably know what's happening at the weekend. But the reality is, Neil, they need a good performance for themselves more than anything. They need to get a clinical performance and be sharp. There's obviously going to be mistakes. There's things will go wrong, but I think more so for themselves, we all want to see them, get a really good performance here and build their confidence and self-belief going into that quarter-final. Providing they win the game. I have to add that in now because we were all talking about South Africa a few weeks ago when we beat Scotland. So look, it's a very strong side, and I'm sure there's a lot of determination within that group to try and get it right. There's no guarantee. I was at the Samoa press conference today. We Owen and myself chatted to Chris Latham. They're very, very determined to cause an upset. They have a lot of good players. They've been disjointed in some of their performances, but they have individual talent that can hurt you. So if Ireland are not switched on and on the money early on, they can cause problems. Samoa can cause problems for teams. But I expect Ireland. Look, I'm delighted Robbie Henshaw is back. I just think he brings energy, enthusiasm, quality. Hopefully he's fit and raring to go. Jordan Larmour, he's threat from full back. And Sexton and Murray, these guys have not played a lot in the last kind of 12 months together, and hopefully they can get a good run out together and build some confidence and a little bit of continuity, hopefully going into a quarter final. And so it's a Typhoon it's an option for Typhoon as well, a real opportunity for him in the back row. I thought himself and Rhys Ruddock played really well against Russia. They made a lot of good carries, dynamic carries, and if he plays well today, he can probably put a little bit of pressure on Peter O'Mahony in that back row. In the first game, our back row was superb. Stander, Van der Fleer, Peter O'Mahony went off early, and Jack Conan came on and played really well. But we need a dominant performance out of our back row, and when Peter O'Mahony comes on, and for him to deliver the same as well.
Yeah, on Typhoon there, I might actually just play a short little clip from Ireland's press conference this morning. As we mentioned, Typhoon preferred over Peter O'Mahony at 6 and Rhys Ruddock as well. So we can hear now from Joe Schmidt on the decision to pick Typhoon there this afternoon.
Yeah, he's been really solid. He's been versatile for us. He's, I thought he carried well against Russia, albeit the ball was more and more through the game a bar of soap, so it made it very difficult. I think his ability to put pressure on the ball on the ground, his line-out work has been good. He gives us a little bit more height in the line-out, probably not quite the speed that Pete has in getting up in the line-out. I think defensively he gets off the line well, and he's trained really well, and that's probably the bit that people don't see that does certainly have an influence in our eyes in making selections.
Quinny, I think for the most part we'd probably associate Typhoon with playing in the second row. Obviously he's played a lot in the back row as well, but the second row is kind of where we see him play most of the time for Munster, and a lot of his appearances for Ireland so far have been there as well. What's he going to be doing differently if he's playing as a blindside flanker as opposed to in the second row? Does his role in the team change, do you think, much? Yeah,
it does a little bit. I think you have a little bit more freedom to to go after the breakdown. I think off first phase. I think when you're packing down the scrum, you're obviously not out as quick as the back row. So he's probably going to get himself involved in a lot more front-up collisions and opportunities to poach, like Joe said there. And we've seen it's a real strength of his, being able to turn ball over, counter up, putting pressure on people, and he's quick and he's dynamic as well. So, resourcing the breakdown if Bundy, Aki, Sexton or any of these guys carry as well, and try and be an option to coming around the corner, carrying balls. So he runs very, very good lines, and there's a similarity with James Ryan, the way he can kind of accelerate onto the ball. So you can do those things a little bit more freely in the back row as opposed to the second row. Your role is, you're probably involved in a lot of the first and second, third phase stuff a lot quicker than you are as a second row. But then when the game opens up, I think it's everybody has to probably take the number off their back, and the modern game has changed so much now where props need to give passes, second rows need to run good lines, all that kind of stuff. But he's a real good footballer, so and he's probably been stuck between second row, back row with Ireland. I know he's probably played more, consistently as a second row for Munster, but I think you go back to the whole reason why Munster signed him and brought him back to Ireland was because of his performances, mainly as a back row for Scarlet. So he can do both really well. It's probably you can sometimes become a utility player when you're playing with Ireland because of that ability to play both. But I think it's a really good opportunity for him, and he's a superb footballer.
Yeah, and I think it's something we would have seen a couple of years ago. I remember in the Six Nations for England a couple of years ago, Maro Itoje was picked in the back row and Courtney Laws was put into the second row, and a lot of people were talking about how much this changes Maro Itoje's role. But I think after the first couple of games, you could notice that Maro Itoje was actually going in as the second row in the scrums. Courtney Laws was, hanging off the back as the flanker, and ultimately what they were kind of doing was the exact same thing on the pitch. And as you kind of said there, the way the game is developing, once you're a few phases in, your second row and your back row, the roles are almost kind of becoming the same thing a little bit.
Yeah, but you want your back row hunting, don't you? You know what I mean? That's the whole idea of they're the guys that you want being influential on first, second, third phase. Those are the guys that you back are really good readers of the game. There's a lot of skillful second rows who probably would struggle with the reading, the lines of running, playing in the back row. They're certainly athletic enough to do that, but it's a little bit different. Sometimes you need to. I'm not saying that back rows are more intelligent than second rows.
I think you are.
No, I'm not. It's well, I'd say when I played with Munster, Paul O'Connell and Donegal O'Callaghan would argue that I wasn't brighter than them. But it's just a little bit different, really. It's how you read the game and how you want to impact those kind of phases. There's early phases when the ball comes off set piece, whether it be scrum or line-up. And obviously, I think you need a bit more dynamism for the back row. You need to be able to move across the pitch a little bit quicker and stuff like that. So you look at England with who play two sevens, Curry and
Underhill.
Oh God, pardon?
Underhill.
I'm gone blank. Sorry. Australia do it with with Hooper and Pocock. New Zealand are doing it now with Sam Kane and you'll have to help me again.
Artie Savia.
Savia, yeah. If they play, so it's all about speed and movement now and getting around the field. That's not very good. I'm missing out on fellas' names there, isn't it? But so it depends. And then, you can on maybe wet, windy conditions. Sometimes teams tend to go for that big six, that big someone who can play in that second row role. But Tyburn covers a lot of ground. He's very quick and dynamic. So it's an opportunity for him. Sometimes we hear about this balance in the back row all the time, but our back row just haven't been clicking as a unit for the last number of months. So it's disappointing a little bit. So I know because I played there. I'm not just saying this, but I think back rows can win or lose games for you because they can hunt down the opposition halfbacks. They can get turnovers in defence. They can make all those carries. They can make line breaks. So they're involved in so much throughout the game. And that's why usually their stats for carries, tackles, involvements and breakdowns are the highest of anyone on the pitch.
Yeah, and as you say, like, I mean, if you get that call wrong with your back row, they're the guys that could end up giving away 5-6 penalties in front of your own goal, and it's costing you 15 points or something. But on that,
you're on the edge. You're on the edge, Neil, as a back row. You know what I mean? You're right there. You're right at the cut and thrust of all those big kind of crucial collisions, and those decisions that have to be made. Whether you go for a ball, don't go for a ball, whether you pass, carry, whatever. So it's multi-dimensional, really, to play in that position, and some guys, can play that role in the second row, back row very comfortably.
And would the selection of Byrne kind of, in your mind, does that give you an indication of the way Ireland are maybe looking to play if he's chosen him over O'Mahony, and in particular over Rhys Ruddock as well, who was definitely Ireland's standout performer last week?
Well, I think with respect to Rhys Ruddock had a great game. I think he's very unfortunate and lucky. I think if at any stage that Peter O'Mahony is not a starter for Ireland, I think you want to try and make sure you have a real good line-out option, an extra line-out option in the back row, because it's so important. So I think maybe that's where Typhoon might get the nod over Rhys, because he's that bit taller and he's a very functional line-out operator. Peter O'Mahony is probably, world class in that role. We've seen him contesting an opposition ball, winning his own ball. I think that, for Peter, the competition has started, a little bit slowly for him, because he got injured in that first game. Probably a lot of them underperformed against Japan, and he didn't play the full game against Russia either. So it's I think they're looking at seeing can Typhoon offer something as a starting player. But look, I'd expect Peter O'Mahony to start next week, unless Typhoon has a 9 out of 10 performance, because that kind of experience that Peter O'Mahony has. But I think Peter, by his own admission, would probably say he needs to make more carries. His breakdown work is exceptional. His line-out work is exceptional. But you want your blindside flanker just carrying the ball and trucking it up a little bit more.
Before we let you go, you mentioned you were out at Samoa's press conference this morning. You caught up with Chris Latham. I don't want to spoil the full interview for us, but what's Chris been saying? Was he disappointed his hat-trick record was gone from the other day with Cobus Reinach taking it from him? What are we expecting from Samoa this weekend?
Well, I was interested to know what their approach to Ireland would be, and what they expect of Ireland. And not from a tactical point of view, but just from maybe a reaction point of view, with the disappointment of the last couple of weeks. Even though the big disappointment is the Japan one, the Russia one, it was job done, wasn't it? It wasn't clinical. But I would expect Ireland to really come out with a determination and to react to that, and to really try and go after, get their emotion very high. And so I asked him how would he deal with that, and he said he's expecting it, and that Samoa need to be very physical. But he was confident, and I think I understand where he's coming from. If it clicks for Samoa, they're very, very dangerous. They were stop-start against Russia. They won 34-0. They lost 34-0 against Scotland. They were quite poor. But a lot of the tries Scotland kind of scored were on the back of mistakes and offloads and just kind of silly errors. And so if they cut those out, and it's always easier to go back and look, if they cut those out, they have a lot of potential to hurt teams and cut teams up. I think some decisions went against them against Japan. There's absolutely no doubt about that. So the way you play them for Ireland is hold on to the ball and build pressure and momentum and make good decisions, and make sure the skill set is a lot higher than it has been, and try and not force those turnovers yourself. I think Andy Farrell will definitely try and have his Irish team, forcing them into making those offloads and just scattering them a little bit. So he's confident, and I think they're definitely a dangerous proposition, because there's a lot of good players in that team who can cut opposition defences up. So Ireland have got to stay pretty well together and defensively and do the basics well. The set piece, the scrum, the line-out has to be good. But he played with a kind of a smile on his face, and he played with a freedom, Chris Latham, and he enjoys working with Samoa, and he really believes that they can be very, very dangerous at the weekend. And if Ireland are not on the money, really, I think they could be very, very dangerous for Ireland.
Is it hugely important for Ireland to get a couple of scores relatively early on in the game? And because Samoa are that kind of team that if they can get a bit of confidence in a match, that's all of a sudden when they do really become dangerous. And if they do go down early on, they are the kind of side also that the heads will drop a little bit.
No, I want Ireland to play poor for the first 20 minutes and I want them to play great for the second 60, because the last couple of matches Ireland were brilliant in the first 20 minutes.
True.
They were superb against Japan, and then they had that lull period for 40 minutes in the middle of both those games. So no, look, in an ideal situation, I wouldn't expect Ireland to be perfect. I'm not really sure if it will be good. I hope it is. But I think they need to be conscious. I think the decision making and their support play and their lines of running and their timing of that stuff, that's probably the area where they need to get right. And if they do that and play with a high tempo and an energy and an aggression, you've got to be aggressive against Samoa, because if you go in half-hearted, Neil, you can be smashed. One-on-one tackles, breakdown, all that kind of stuff. So they'll have to bring a level of an intensity and an aggression, but they've got to be much more accurate in what they're trying to do this week. And you go back to Scotland. They made some mistakes, but they were superb. And if they can find that kind of performance, I think they'll be okay.
Yeah, and finally, last word then, will Ireland get the job done? Will they get their bonus point and sleep easily on Saturday night?
I hope so. I'm not really sure. I think they will. I think I think there's a very strong side, and they will be very determined to get it right. I think they're going to have to work incredibly hard for it. They're not going to get anything easy from Samoa. Japan had to really, really push themselves, and they got that late bonus point win. So, in an ideal world, they get a couple of scores early on, and they can, be a little bit more comfortable. I wouldn't like to be going into the second half chasing 3 tries or something like that, but I think they'll get the job done. I think they will get the bonus point.
All right, Quinny, thanks a million for joining us, and stay safe over the next few days as well. I hope you've stocked up on bread.
We're all sorted, yeah. I'm away from the eye of the storm, so we'll probably get a bit of rain. But thanks, Neil. Anyway, fingers crossed for a good
Speak
result.
to you soon. So yeah, Alan Quinlan there ahead of Ireland and Samoa. Might just run through as well the Samoan team that was named this morning as well. 2 changes for them in total from the result, their last game out against Japan. So they've gone for I have it here now. I'll just get the team news. They've Steve Jackson made just 2 changes. Loosehead prop Newcastle's Lugavi Mulapola starts ahead of and second row Teafoli Paulo come into the starting 15. They sat out the defeat to Japan. They replace Jordan Lay and Piulu Fayaseli, who dropped to the bench. It means the Lamb brothers, hooker Saliala and captain number 8 Jack start a second successive World Cup game alongside each other. And Jackson keeps faith with the same backline that started that game against Japan. Now, a few texts coming into us here as well. Owen Burke says on the cancellations, if New Zealand needed a win, it would have been played. I think that's what Sergio Parise was saying as well. Hackatime Rugby says World Rugby were very clear on how they would treat situations like this. All teams were briefed in advance. Barden Plays says we're going to Wales versus Uruguay on Sunday, but we're not sure if our flight out of Tokyo will be cancelled or not. And that, of course, is the major concern for the amount of fans as well. Not just that matches are being cancelled, but the disruption it means for fans travelling around Japan, and the trains as well, which are such an important part of their infrastructure. A lot of these guys picked to play are still lucky to be first choice. This is on Ireland. They need big performances, as many of the second choice guys have outperformed them. Dave Kelly, as we had asked to Quinny, why is Ruddock not involved? Probably our best ball carrier. And then Leonardo da Vinci, writing to us from the grave. When Ireland play well, their line speed is always excellent, and I think that goes back to what Quinny was saying as well. They need to, Andy Farrell will have been very much getting in the faces of the Samoa players early on. Almost time for us to finish here on the Rugby World Cup show, but But it's time for another Rishtard's Rugger thing. This time on the latest episode, noted rugby expert Pat Kenny advises Joe Schmidt on what he should look out for ahead of Samoa this Saturday.
Welcome back to the Pat Kenny Show here on News Talk. How did we come up with that name for the show, says you? Yes, indeed, a good one there by me. Well, usually in times of turmoil and political instability, it's nice to have the uplifting world of sport to turn to, unless, of course, you happen to be an Ireland Rugger fan or a Man U footy fan. Guilty on both counts, Your Honour. As you know, I'm a massive United fan. I've been to many big games there. I still get goosebumps when I recall sitting in the stands at Old Trafford, singing with the United faithful in unison, Kino, just like that. And when I met Roy recently, I was telling him of that very happy memory, and he just looked at me, or through me, perhaps is more accurate. He said nothing, and then just walked away. Yes, I could tell how moved he was by the retelling of that particular tale. And yes, that's Roy for you, a gas ticket. Anyway, the big question for the Rugger fraternity is what's happened to the Ireland team in Japan. I'm delighted to have with me on the phone, live from Japan, the man himself, Joe Schmidt. How are you, Joe?
Yeah, hello, Patrick.
Yeah. How are preparations going? I presume you're right in the midst of dealing with the preparations for the clash with the mighty Samoans.
Yeah. The players had last weekend off, and
yes.
But I've been studying footage of Samoan defensive lines or third and fourth phase. But I'm just about to get stuck into a tape of Samoan breakdown clear-out since 2011, which I'm also pretty excited about.
Yes, I can imagine. Ireland seemed to be struggling with the humidity more than most. Isn't it the same for everyone, though, Joe?
It's not, to be honest. We've actually taken a measurement of the internal temperature of every member of our squad, well, the ones that aren't injured, and on average, they're naturally 7.6 degrees warmer than our opponents. So Tyke Furlong is actually 32.7 degrees hotter by nature, which is why most of the time he has a head like a boiled ham.
Yes, indeed. Yes, of course, the rules of Rugger are complex, aren't they? Very complex. In fact, they're so complex that they're not called rules at all. They're called laws, which is pretty confusing, even for someone with a degree in engineering like me. But how will you cope with the Samoans? How will you differ your game from what's gone before? What about picking Johnny Sexton? That might be an idea, because he's pretty good, you know, Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Pat.
Although I suppose injury would be a concern with Johnny, wouldn't it? What happens if some massive Samoan with an apostrophe in the middle of his name and a tattoo where the sun don't shine juggernauts his way through Johnny and slap, bang, wham, he gets injured? What happens then, Joe? No Johnny?
Yeah, again, that's not really in our control. So
I suppose you could start Carberry, couldn't you, leaving Johnny on the bench, and then when Carberry gets injured, which shouldn't take too long, you could bring Johnny on, put him at full back, avoiding that sort of mad contact, and putting Rob Kearney or Jordan Larmour at out half. What about that, Joe?
Yeah, that wouldn't really make much sense.
I did a bit of coaching myself, Dorky under-8s, and we tried to play a more expansive game, certainly than Ireland are playing at the moment. And I thought, what about bringing Simon Zebo out, Joe? Have you thought of Simon Zebo?
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Or maybe not. Finally, Joe, some controversy about whether the game is going to be played or not because of a typhoon. How will you prepare for that, Joe?
Well, part of our process is not to concern ourselves with things outside of our control. So what tangible benefit is there in worrying about typhoons?
Yes, tangible benefits indeed. Good point, Joe. Finally, Joe, you picked Jack McCarthy, didn't you, to start against Japan. Was that a mistake, Joe? A bad mistake? Do you regret that one, Joe?
Yeah, Pat, Johnny was actually carrying a knock that week, and I've made that pretty clear that we tend to try and avoid picking players who are in fact injured, which is why we picked Jack Carty. What a f***ing moron.
Yes, thanks, Joe. Thanks for that. Well, no wonder things are going pear-shaped for Joe. Not willing to listen to common sense. Right, we'll take a break.
Richard's rugger thing.
On Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us, everyone in.
Yeah, that was another Richard's rugger thing. Thank you very much, Pat Kenny. I have been told there is going to be another one coming this evening, so keep an eye on your Off the Ball social channels, at Off the Ball on Twitter and YouTube, and Off the Ball this evening on News Talk. I've been told there might be an appearance, possibly, from former Irish international Tommy Bowe. So we'll have to wait and see for that one. That's all we have time for this afternoon, though, on the Rugby World Cup show. Just a reminder, the games coming up over the next few days, the ones that are surviving anyway, Australia and Georgia, they finish off their Pool D campaign tomorrow morning, 11:15 Irish time. Then New Zealand and Italy and England, France, those two games that had been slated for Saturday, they are now cancelled, which was confirmed this morning. But Saturday morning, 11:45, Ireland and Samoa, that is a go. That is going ahead. We will have Johnny Murphy on the Rugby World Cup show with us on Saturday morning to preview and look ahead to that game before the 11:45 kickoff. And he'll also be with us on the FM that afternoon from 1 o'clock as the game is going on. On Sunday then, Namibia and Canada. That is a very early start, 4:15 a.m. Irish time, as Namibia go in search of their first ever Rugby World Cup win. USA and Tonga then is at 6:45 a.m. before Wales and Uruguay. These games still potentially could be cancelled based on what happens with the typhoon coming their way. Wales and Uruguay, 9:15 a.m. on Sunday morning, followed by hopefully Japan and Scotland, because if that game is cancelled, there are a lot of questions for World Rugby to answer. It would be a complete farce, really, if that game was cancelled, and it would put a massive asterisk, I think, beside the achievements Japan have made over the course of this World Cup. That is all we have time for this afternoon, though. There'll be more rugby reaction coming up this evening on Off the Ball from 7 o'clock, as well as OTB AM tomorrow, and we'll be back before the Ireland-Samoa game on Saturday morning, just after 11 o'clock in the morning. We'll speak to you then.
You're listening to Off the Ball.
The Rugby World Cup on OTB Sports Radio. OTB AM.
To our man in Japan,